Ahmednagar, one place that occupies a distinctive position in the history of our own country. Ahmednagar is also the place where the Indian Cavalry Tank Museum is situated. Dynasties like the Bahmanis have ruled this important place. Ahmednagar has also seen many renowned rulers like the Nizam and Queen Chand Bibi. Emperor Aurangzeb died near Ahmednagar. The cantonment at Ahmednagar is nearly 200 years old. This very cantonment accommodates the Armoured Corps Centre and School. The Cavalry Tank Museum is an important landmark of Ahmednagar. Armoured fighting vehicles retire here in the Cavalry Tank Museum. The construction of the Cavalry Tank Museum commenced in February 1993, and this was inaugurated by the late General B.C. Joshi, a tank man himself. This museum was conceived by Major General I.N. Luthra. At the entrance of the Tank Museum, a notice board greets the visitor. This says that the Tank Museum is open to general public between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on all days, and that photography is permitted. Once we go inside the Cavalry Tank Museum, we find that there is a spectacular view. The Tank Museum has different armoured vehicles of various kinds. Each of these are displayed here. These tanks, which have fired the imagination of the people at large, have an interesting history. In the early 20th century, trench warfare stagnated the development of war tactics. Necessity is the mother of invention, and thus came about the advent of the tank, which could move across trenches. The British Big Willie is said to be the mother of all tanks. Designed by William and W.G. Wilson, it was driven by a 105 horsepower tractor engine. The center of gravity was kept low by side-mounting the gun, weighed over 30 tons and had a top speed of 4 miles per hour. However, the tanks were preceded by the development of the armored car before 1912. The armored car that one sees in the background is the Rolls-Royce Armoured Car. This was one of the most successful of all the armoured cars that were built on existing commercial chases in the days of the First World War. And this very armoured car was the most widely used armoured car in the First World War. This saw action in the Middle East, France, Egypt, East Africa, as also Russia. And this was used for internal security duties in India in 1945. Incidentally, this was the sort of a car that was used by General Dyer during the infamous Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. And this armoured car is the oldest exhibit in this museum. Rolls-Royce produced the most successful of all the armoured cars in the earlier part of the century. This could attain a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour. It was powered by a Rolls-Royce 6-cylinder inline water-cooled petrol engine. Sdkfz 232 Armoured Car was the most powerful and best-known model of its times, with the suffix 8 RAD as a distinguishing mark. By virtue of a relatively complex chassis layout, this vehicle was the most advanced cross-country wheeled vehicle of its time. The most unique feature of this vehicle was that it was driven by two drivers facing in opposite directions. The German army used these Panthers extensively during the Second World War. After the First World War, the Japanese have hired a number of tanks from Europe. However, during the late 1920s, Japan built its first tank. The diesel rather than the petrol engine was adopted. The Type 95 Hargo entered service in the Japanese Army in 1935 and remained in service until 1945. It saw action in China, Burma and the Pacific Islands during the Second World War. In an attempt to keep the temperatures low, the inside of the tank was provided with a layer of asbestos padding. Weighing just about 7.4 tons, the Hargo was powered by a Mitsubishi model 6-cylinder air-cooled diesel engine. This tank was preceded by its earlier models Type 92 and Type 94. The model that followed the Type 95 was a Type 97 Chiha medium tank. This tank was a vast improvement on the earlier Japanese tanks and was probably the best Japanese tank of that period. The tank could attain speeds of 25 miles per hour. Its main armament consisted of a 57 mm gun. During this period, protection to the infantry was also being thought of. Accordingly, the idea of an infantry carrier was conceived from the tracked ammunition carrier vehicles of the 1920s. Thus, the Cotton Lloyd was developed in 1939. 74,000 such vehicles were produced in the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the US, where these were known as the T-16. The T-16 saw service in all theatres during the Second World War. The howe consisted of two coffin-shaped compartments with the engine and the gearbox in between. Memories of this carrier are fading in the infantry now, but in its days, it was one of the best-loved special vehicles. The Lynx Scout car was the Canadian equivalent of the British Daimler Dingo, but was heavier and fitted with a more powerful Ford V-shaped 8-cylinder engine. The A9 cruiser tank was designed for large maneuvers and deep strikes for the British Army of the 1930s. It was fitted with external steering brakes in the rear and had a slow-motion suspension. The A9 was the first British tank to have a power traverse for the turret. It had a 2-pounder gun and 1.303-inch Vickers machine gun. With the combined driving and fighting compartment, the cruiser had limited armor protection. The inherent mobility of the tanks and the mobility provided to the infantry by way of infantry carriers now made situations in the battlefield fluid. In order to strike with speed, it became essential to gain maximum information about the enemy's defenses and its mobile reserves. Thus, the need arose to develop a vehicle suitable for this role. The M3A1 was introduced in the US Army as a reconnaissance and command vehicle in 1939. The distinctive front roller was designed to prevent the vehicle from digging its nose into ditches. The M3A1 marked the end of wheeled reconnaissance vehicles but served as a basis for half-track development. It could seat 8 men and was powered by a Hercules DXD 6-cylinder engine. The Infantry Tank Mark II was derived from the A7 experimental series of medium tanks. It was designed to perform a tactical role as the infantry support tank. These tanks were first issued to the 7th Royal Tank Regiment of the British Army in 1940. The tank was universally known as Matilda because while moving, it resembled the way Matilda the comical duck waddled. The apertures along with the house side of the tanks were provided to expel the mud cakes from the tracks. Another notable feature was that the turret could be rotated by using hydraulic power. The Matilda was armed with a 2-pounded gun and a coaxial 7.92 mm Baser machine gun. As a gun tank, it last saw action in 1942 when it was commonly referred to as the Queen of the Battlefield. The Valentine Infantry Tank Mark III was an outcome of an urgent requirement during 1938 to supplement the Matilda program. It derived its name from the date when the design was submitted to the War Office on the 14th of February 1938, that is St. Valentine's Day. Valentines gained a great reputation for reliability. Reportedly, some of the tanks motored over 3,000 miles on tracks following the 8th Army. The Valentine was armed with a 2-pounder gun, which was later replaced by a 6-pounder gun. The inherent disadvantage with tanks was their inability to cross ditches and other obstacles. To overcome this problem, some kind of a mobile bridge to accompany the tanks was required. The Valentine bridge layer was the first British bridge-laying tank of the Second World War. It carried a 30-foot scissors bridge adapted on a Valentine II chassis. The bridge was raised by means of hydraulic power. The Valentine bridge layer tank was powered with a AEC 6-cylinder diesel engine. As we know, the M3A1 marked the end of the wheeled reconnaissance vehicles, but served as a basis for half-track development. The concept of the half-track was pioneered in Russia before the First World War. The M3 half-track entered into service with the US Army in 1941. In tactical terms, the half-track was basically the equivalent of the British Bren carrier, but was larger and more powerful. It may be noted that the development of the half-track dates back to 1938, when a 4-wheeled scout car was fitted with a tracked rear bogie of the T9 half-track. The M3A3 American light tank, known as Stuart Mark V in the British Army, entered service with the US Army in 1941. The armament included a 37 mm gun and 3.30-inch machine guns. It could attain road speeds of 36 miles per hour and was powered by a Continental radial air-cooled engine developing 250 brake horsepower. The 7th Cavalry was equipped with this tank during the Second World War. The turret was extended at the rear to house the wireless set. During the 1948 operations, the 7th Cavalry of the Indian Army earned laurels for itself by taking these tanks up to and beyond heights of 12,000 feet. The M24, named after the US General Chaffee, was developed to replace the Stuarts. This tank was a quantum increase in technology. It supported a 75 mm gun. The Chaffee could attain road speeds of 34 miles per hour and was powered by two Cadillac 44T 24 V8 water-cooled petrol engines. The Chaffee had a crew of 5 members and was used extensively. The Humber Armored Car entered service with the British Army in 1941. It was used by many countries, including India. This car was armed with a 37 gun. The Humber was powered by a Roots 6-cylinder petrol engine, which gave the armored car a maximum road speed of 45 miles per hour. The vehicle was phased out shortly after the end of the Second World War. One of the Indian Independent Armoured Squadrons used these in Nagaland from 1957 till 1971. The landing vehicle tract was intended primarily for use in flood relief operations and rescue of crashed aircrew. This armoured version, the LVT-A4, was mounted with the turret and howitzer of the M8 75 howitzer motor carriage. The LVTs were first used in August 1942 in a logistic role. It could attain road speeds of 17 miles per hour and waterborne speeds of 6 miles per hour. The Fox 1 armoured car, built in 1942, was the Canadian equivalent of the Humber Mark III. The drive was normally on the rear wheels, but 4-wheel drive could be engaged. The turret was larger than that of the Humber and could accommodate a crew of 4 members. The armament consisted of 1.303 and 1.50-inch machine guns. The M3 Grant medium tank was named after the famous US General Ulysses Grant. It was the first tank from which indirect fire was possible. This tank mounted a 75 gun in a sponson on the right-hand side of the tank. It was powered by a Wright Continental air-cooled radial petrol engine. The Grant had its first impact during the Second World War in the Battle of Gazala. Above the howe superstructure was a turret with a 37 gun and a .30-inch machine gun. The M3 was finally declared obsolete in 1944. Field Marshal Montgomery's tactical headquarters of the 8th Army were based in this type of tank. The Churchill was a replacement for the Matilda. It was designed to function in the shelled area of the battle zone in support of infantry. It was powered by 2 6-cylinder water-cooled petrol engines developing 350 brake horsepower at 2,200 rpm. The tank had a trench crossing capacity of 10 feet as against 8 feet in most of the tanks. This tank could attain road speeds of 15.5 miles per hour. Armed with a 75 gun, it was the first British tank to have an all-round vision for the commander in closed-down position. The Churchills were first employed in August 1942. This tank was used by Jordan, Russia and other countries. This is the Sherman Crab Flail tank. This was developed by the British in 1944. The idea of flails was originated by Captain Detroit, a South African engineer, as a means of pulverizing the ground to detonate mines or remove them by force. The flails with small bob weights on ends of chains were mounted on the Sherman tank. The drum rotated at speed and the chains detonated the mines in front of the vehicle. The speed during such an operation was 1 mile per hour. The tank was powered by a Ford petrol engine. Flail technology led to the evolution of the troll equipment in 1960. The British 79th Armoured Division used the Flail tank to clear a path through minefields in Europe. The Grand Canal Defence Light was a misleading term adopted as a security measure. The Grand CDL was a Grand tank fitted additionally with a 14 million sea-power searchlight while retaining its gun. The idea of mounting a searchlight was proposed by Commander Lutheran in the earlier part of the First World War so as to blind the enemy during a night attack. The Grand CDLs were used twice to illuminate crossings over the Rhine and Elbe rivers in 1945. The Centurions entered service with the British Army in 1949 and were replaced in 1967 by the Chieftain Mbt. It was capable of attaining a maximum road speed of 21.5 miles per hour. This tank weighed 50 tons and was armed with a 20-pounder gun. The secondary armament consisted of a coaxially mounted .30-inch machine gun and another .30-inch machine gun fitted on the commander's cupola. The Centurion actively participated in 1965 and 1971 operations. The Indian troops swore by its performance and commonly called it a pattern killer. The Cavalry Tank Museum, which exhibits various tanks from different periods of history, attracts many visitors daily. A large number of these visitors are children and women. For the children, it is a dream come true. Visitors come to know about various minute details about the different models of tanks that are displayed in this very museum. For the visitors, detailed briefing is carried out.
इस टैंक को इस उद्देश्य से बनाया गया था कि ये एक रिकॉनेसेंस व्हीकल रहेगी और एक टैंक डिस्ट्रॉयर रहेगी। भारत में आने के बाद इसे 2 रेजिमेंट्स में दिया गया। इसकी खासूसियतें कुछ इस प्रकार से हैं। इसकी गन 75 मिलीमीटर्स की है। मेन गन के अलावा एक 7.62 मिलीमीटर मशीन गन इसके साथ कोएक्सियली माउंट की गई है। इसके पीछे एक छोटा सा हैच है जो कि टर्रेट पे लगाया गया है। गन के फायर करने के बाद खाली खोखा वहाँ से गिराया जाता है। इस पे एक ऑसिलेटिंग टर्रेट है जिसके वजह से फ्रांस इसमें एक ऑटो लोडर लगा सका और जिसके वजह से क्रू जो नॉर्मल 4 का होता है वो 3 पे लाया गया। भारत में 65 और 71 ऑपरेशन में इस टैंक ने भाग लिया और ये बहुत ही सक्सेसफुल रहा। दुश्मन इसे जंपिंग टैंक के नाम से जानता था और जो 2 रेजिमेंट जिनके पास ये था वो अभी भी इस टैंक के नाम पर शपथ लेती हैं।
Apart from different tanks which are exhibited outside, the Cavalry Tank Museum also has 2 memory halls. These very halls occupy a distinctive place in the museum. On entering them, one is transported to a different era. Memories which are cherished, memories which are fond, are displayed here. The history of different regiments of the Armoured Corps are also on display in this museum. The entire exhibits here give a person a sense of history. It captures the spirit of the Armored Corps. In the Cavalry Tank Museum, we have the Heroes Gallery, one place where the names and photographs of the valiant Armored Corps soldiers are displayed. These are the soldiers who faced the enemy and laid down their lives while defending their motherland. A visit to the Cavalry Tank Museum instills a feeling of patriotism in the minds of all who come here. What are your reactions on this museum?
Well, this tank museum is superb. I didn't expect it so nice, so colorful, and so many varieties of tanks are being displayed so nicely. I am really happy.
यहाँ पर आकर बहुत अच्छा लगा। अनेक देखने को टैंक पार्क वगैरह अनेक देखने को मिले। अनेक अंदर जो वस्तुएं हैं, अंदर जो चित्र हैं वो बहुत अच्छे लगते हैं। वीर शहीदों के बारे में जानकारी चलती है, किसने देश के लिए क्या किया, कब लड़ाइयाँ हुई थी, और अनेक फ़ोटो हैं। और इसे देखकर हमारा मन बहुत आकर्षक आनंद होता है। हमें बहुत आनंद होता है यहाँ कर। दिल करता है हम यहाँ पर फिर आएँ और फिर इन्हें देखें। और यहाँ पर अनेक हैं, जैसे कि पार्क जैसे टैंक है, पता चलता है कि ये दूसरे देशों का है, ये किसने जीता था, कब लड़ाई हुई थी, इसका क्या परिणाम है, इसका औसत वजन कितना है, इसमें कहाँ से फायर होता है, इसकी अनेक बातों का मालूम होता है। और भी अनेक बातें जिससे पता चलता है कि भाई ये टैंक पानी के अंदर चलता था, इस टैंक को इस नाम से जानते हैं, ये टैंक कब का बना है, इसमें कितना वजन, इन सब बातों का पता लगता है।
Do you feel proud of your country after seeing this museum?
Yeah, I feel proud of my country by seeing these tanks kept in this museum.
हमारे को जहाँ अलग अलग देशों के टैंक देखने को मिले। इससे पहले हम टैंक और भी देखे थे, लेकिन इतनी किस्म के टैंक हमने नहीं देखे थे। ये टैंक जिन्होंने लड़ाइयों के अंदर हिस्सा लिया और जो नौजवान लड़ाई के अंदर शहीद हुए, उनका नाम जोर जोर से पुकार रहे हैं।
क्या प्रेरणा मिलती है आपको यहाँ आकर?
हमें आगे यहाँ आकर यह प्रेरणा मिलती है कि कौन कौन से वीर कितने महान हुए। हम हमारे दिल में ये सब देख के यह भी इच्छा प्रकट होती है कि हम भी इनके जैसे वीर बने।
Indeed, the Cavalry Tank Museum is a fitting tribute to not only tanks but also to the spirit of men who ride them.